Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to this session here right now. We're talking about running applications, and I'd like to welcome the first speaker. He's going to present the paper Enabling SAP ERP-based standard software solution for business process management. So, yeah, start with your speech.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would also like to welcome you to my talk. Just for a brief introduction, my name is Guppenberger. I am an IT architect at MSG Systems, which is a software IT company based in Munich. I will tell you some very brief facts later. And I'm here today to tell you something about the enablement of standard software, SAP standard software, which is what we actually develop for BPM purposes. So in the previous talks, yesterday and this morning, you heard quite a lot about process management, how to build processes, how to maintain processes, how to execute processes. And what I'm trying to do in the next 30 minutes or so is to give you an impression of the other side of the medal, which is how to build software that is able to be integrated into processes. Just for a brief overview, the agenda for today, or for the next few minutes. First of all, I'm going to give you some insight on the project situation, about the surroundings of the project we are working on. Then I will pick basically three major topics or three important aspects from our experience to bring that to you, to show you which challenges we were facing, how we solved them, and to maybe give you some impression of what is happening on the other side in software development itself. And of course, I will try to make a brief summary and conclusion to bring together the most important facts of our work. So for the project situation, as far as I've learned from the talks during coffee breaks and so on, MSG Systems is not familiar in this round or in this audience, so I can give you some very brief facts. We are a software company, IT company, which was founded in 1980. We are based in Ismaning, near Munich, with a total of, I think, at the time it's more than 4,000 employees worldwide. And a bit more than 400 of them are working in Passau, which is, I think, 30 kilometers from here, in our SAP development center. That means that we develop software, we develop standard software, which is sold by the SAP. And I will, on the next slide, give you a brief impression of one of the software products which I will be talking about. I also brought you the list of the board of directors, not because I want you to learn that by heart, but to show that one of the directors is actually one of the co-authors of our paper. I think that shows that this topic really has management attention in our company. Regarding the authors, we were total of 4 authors. Our main author, Götzfried, who is actually the expert in this topic, is currently on holiday. I think he's somewhere near Sri Lanka. I offered him to change, so I could go on holiday and he could give this talk, but he didn't agree, don't know why. Okay, so let's jump in. Regarding the pre-project situation, as I call it, we are developing one software product called FSRI, which is Financial Services for Reinsurance. It's a traditional SAP application, as you know it, SAP Dynpros, SAP UIs. No explicit process control within the UI. You have UIs for expert users, as we call it, who can actually do any task they want if they know how to do it, but they are not guided. They have to know where to click, where to enter the data, what to do at what time. Nevertheless, it's a software that has been developed for 12 or 13 years already. So it's up to now, it's the world market leader. It's in use in all major active reinsurances around the globe. And what we experienced was the impression or the statements from customers that they are kind of swifting from the traditional UI approach to process management, and they want to integrate their software into processes regarding or fitting to their enterprise. So we were facing the challenge that we had to make FSRI ready for BPM enablement or for the usage within BPM, business process management, which means we have to kind of define APIs, have to define services. We have to prepare the software from a technical and from a business view for the integration into a complex insurance landscape. I don't know how familiar you are with that business, but insurance companies usually do not have only one system, but it's a conglomerate, a big landscape of many different systems for the policy management, the collections, disbursements, and so on and so forth. There are many different systems who have to be integrated and have to work together. So what customers want actually is that they say, okay, FSRE is this standard solution. The business functionality that we need is in there. We do not want to reinvent it. We do not want to redesign it. We want to use it, but we want to use it in our processes. And this is the challenge we were facing and we had to cope with. Of course, in standard product development, it's different from what we do in project business. It's not that we have one instance of a solution, we put it to the customer and kind of fire and forget, here you are, this is what you need, we can tweak it to your needs, and then we go on to the next one. But standard software means that we develop one product which is used with really, really many customers with different needs, and we have to go on developing this software and we have to maintain the software, so it has to be stable. Nevertheless, or not nevertheless, but what that means is that we, on the one hand side, have to provide industry standard quality, which is quite hard to achieve by itself, but we have limited resources, of course, because the BPM enablement of the software does not really provide added value for the customer. It's just something that he sees as a must-have. However, management usually wants to put the resources and the development effort into the development of new business functionality, because that is what really sells well. So we had to provide good quality in our services, because bad services would obviously harm the whole application, but we had very limited resources for that. And the second challenge or special requirement is that we were using an iterative development approach, namely it was Scrum in our case, which means that we have no designated design phase at the beginning of the software development, but we have sprints with 3 or 4 weeks, and within each of these sprints we have to develop new services, new APIs, and they have to be developed from scratch, from the greenfield to a production-ready quality. And finally, and very important as well, as we develop standard software, we do not develop it for one particular customer, which we know quite good, but we develop it for the market. And that means that a priori we do not know precisely how the processes at each customer work and how they run. So this is the third challenge that we were facing in our work. Okay, how did we solve this? Just to give you an impression of what we were doing, what I will be talking about in the next 10 slides or 12 slides are the results that we gained from an actual development project. That means a team of, I think, 7 or 8 developers has been working for several months on a project which developed a process-based solution based on our FSRI system. And it was kind of split into 2 parts. On the one hand side, we developed processes. I will come back to that a bit later, because we need some kind of reference processes which we take as an assumption of how the business will work at the customer. And second, but not less important, was the aspect that we had to provide these services, these APIs. You can imagine that FSRI has been built, or development started 12 or 13 years ago. At that time, nobody thought about service-oriented architecture, about business process management, or anything like that. So it was built as applications were built at that time, but not with that in mind. And that faced several challenges, one of them on the architectural side. To give you just a kind of sketch of what we were doing is that we were more or less enhancing the FSRI backend, which already existed for, as I said, 12 or 13 years, and gave it a set or a list of APIs, services, remote function modules, however you want to call them, service interfaces, in order to be used by some kind of process-oriented consumer. Maybe you may ask yourself where the correlation to S-BPM is in our talk. We did not actually use S-BPM, but we think that the problems that arise down here are independent of the way the process control is done up here. So no matter if you use kinds of processes which are directly coded into some kind of HTML5 UI, or if you use BPM or S-BPM or anything like that, the problems down here will be probably the same. Nevertheless, we had to define one reference architecture. We had to make assumptions, and in our case it's rather easy because SAP kind of tells you how to build these architectures, reference architectures, and this is actually what we have here. So we have an application or a process-based application which is browser-based. We have some kind of what SAP calls composition environment down here, which is responsible for the execution of processes, for UIs, for role management, and so on and so forth. We have one layer below something called SAP Process Integration, which is actually a service bus provided by SAP. And then down here we have the providers of the different services, namely FSRI, plus a magnitude of other systems which have to be integrated as well. As I said, the UI is a web-based UI, but I won't focus on that. The SAP CE composition environment allows or gives you various tools to define your UIs, to define your processes in a BPM style way, and to specify how the application will work afterwards or how the processes will work. And the SAP PI, process integration, I sound a bit like an SAP sales representative at the moment, but I'm not, is there to integrate heterogeneous systems on the back-end side. So to unify technical topics, to unify error handling, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what we were doing is kind of top-down approach. We started with the definition of the processes of the UI that we wanted to realize in our solution, kind of designed by contract top-down. We gave or we developed contracts which the services and the processes had to fulfill, and we tried to achieve common architectural goals like loose coupling, maximum reuse, and flexibility in the orchestration itself. A little bit of insight into the architecture, but that will be the last architectural slide then. On the BPM side, we have, as I already said, on the one hand side, the user interfaces, a definition of UIs, the way the user will see the application, and the business process content. So as with every BPM system, we have a separation of business process definition and the execution environment. And this is the execution environment running these processes. In the enterprise service bus, okay, I already said it, kind of homogeneous access to different heterogeneous systems down here. I will not go into that detail here. And what we had to do, and this is actually the first part of something that is very, very important if you have to enhance existing software systems so that they are able to be used in BPM scenarios, is that we put some kind of adapter, or you may call it wrapper, however, around the existing business logic of FSRI. Why do we need that? I have some aspects on this slide. Of course, the functionality which is in FSRI already is the right functionality. It works correctly. It's perfectly fine. But we cannot assume that it is that it provides the functionality in the way that the user or the service consumer expects it. So what we do within the adapter is on the one side that we orchestrate and kind of recompose the existing functionality, reusing the implementation and the coding, but putting it into a different order, for instance. That we, and this is one very, very important point, that we offer stateless services. I do not know how familiar you are with the difference between stateless and stateful, but the problem in our case was that the existing application was built in a kind of stateful way. There were lots of caches inside. There were lots of assumptions in the coding of how the user would work with the application so that we could do pre-computations, and that implies some kind of requirements regarding the order of different functionalities. So the application was built in a way that it required someone to build up the cache before, and then you could do some computations. But if we provide services and APIs for customers for BPM integration, due to scalability reasons, we need to provide these services in a stateless manner. So we may not do, or we may not make any assumptions about the order of service calls or about the way the customer uses these services. So actually quite a lot of work was necessary to provide this stateless access to the initially stateful application inside. Topics like optimistic locking, for instance, were required. So again, due to reasons of scalability, it's not possible to lock any documents or any policies or whatever in the application in a BPM solution, because we do not know when the next step, which might eventually unlock this policy, will happen. We need things like error handling. In our case, it's called forward error handling, which means that in the process execution, we have some parts where we can actually offer compensating services. So in case an error occurs and something has already been committed, it can be undone again. But there are also several cases, or if I come back to the presentation from yesterday, several unexpected and not so harmful exceptions, then we just give it to the user. There's some kind of input basket or some kind of error log where he gets the information that some service call or that some process instance failed at a certain point, and then he has to care to undo these changes or to handle these errors in the way that he thinks it is correct. And I already stated at some points where we're really talking about crucial topics, we also offer compensation services. A critical factor regarding the cutoff or the design of services is, of course, I think everybody will agree on that, the granularity of services. So two fine-grained services are very fine for use and very fine for some kind of very flexible orchestration, but they lead to a not applicable or not appropriate amount of development work, and they would lead to a multitude of service calls in the application, which we actually do not desire, of course. On contrast, two coarse-grained services, I think everybody agrees on that, are not good either. You would need any technical parameters to tell the service what you should actually do. You need different case statements, for instance, or different alternatives within the service implementation. These are all things that we do not want to have in our system. So the challenge or the actual art in enabling an application is to find the right granularity for the services. And I will also give you some hints on how we did that later on. Okay, that's it for the architecture. As I told you, we do not know a priori how the customer will actually use our software and our services, but we make assumptions. We say, okay, this is the architecture we take as an assumption. If the customer uses SAP products at his side, it's very likely that his architecture will be the same. But nevertheless, we have to keep in mind that we cannot completely rely on that. So we cannot, which would be the first case, program against any SAP libraries or anything like that. But we always have to keep the decoupling in mind. Second very important aspect is the topic of modeling. So there was basically three kinds of artifacts that we modeled throughout the whole development process. First, of course, business objects. In such a project situation, it is very, very important to keep some kind of consistent and coherent business object model in mind of how the application offers its services to the customer. So just to make the differentiation, this is not the same or not necessarily the same business object model customers use outside within their processes, but this is how we see our business model of business objects within our application. And this has to be consistent. It has to be coherent across all services, all APIs. Whenever you have a service that somehow deals with policies or any other business object, the attributes have to be named the same. They have to have the same technical description, and so on and so forth, because otherwise customers would always have to do some kind of awkward mapping or transferring of attributes or anything like that, which we try to avoid, of course. So what we did, we tried to be as independent of any actual technology or of any actual workflow system or business process system, but we simply used UML class diagrams to build up our business object model. It was a bit enhanced with UML profiles for some particular constructs that we needed. And by decomposing the business object into several different entities, which kind of make up the total of the business object, we were able to get as much reuse within this business object model as possible. Second, of course, the services have to be represented within the model, so the functionality that is offered by our system. And this is also very important, although we do not know what the services will actually look like at the customer side. We defined reference processes. Our business department knows quite good how business works, so they tried to make some kind of template or some kind of Kickstarter, if you want to call it like that. And they define the processes that we take as an assumption what they will look like at the customers. And of course, we hope that the difference between the customer's actual needs and our reference processes are not too big. So these were represented using normal BPMN 2.0. Again, we tried to be independent of an actual system, and we tried to just keep it as a model which is kind of tapestry at the wall, so that everybody can see, okay, we support these processes using these services, using these business objects, and so on. And one very important aspect, of course, but I think in the meantime this is common for all tools you can use, is that the whole development team works on the same instance of the model in the central repository. So as soon as someone extends the business object model at one point, everybody else, all the other developers, can access this change and can see the new version. I've brought you a very, very, very simple example of how we do that, just to see some kind of business objects that we modeled. As I told you, we use standard UML class diagrams and the differentiation between business objects and their entities. And we also use a very simple representation of what a service might look like. The information in here is basically only the input and the output of the service. But for our needs, that's all that's necessary. So with this information, we can integrate our services into the processes, and everybody knows how to use them. Of course, this is not the size of an actual business object in the in our modeling domain. For those of you who rub their eyes or clean their glasses, I intentionally blurred this picture because it is actually from the developments. It's a snapshot from the actual development, just to give you an impression of the, not really of the size, because this is one of the smallest business objects, but of the kind of complexity that we use within the business object modeling. So this, for instance, is the representation of a reinsured risk, which is actually what is out there at a customer, like one of the twin towers who were reinsured risks. and who are stored within our system. Bit more complexity in the processes. Again, a blurred version just to give you an impression of the size and the complexity that we use in our models. This is one process which is, or it's only an excerpt of the process or of the reference process which we designed or assumed for the underwriting process, which is making offers to customers, computing premiums he has to pay, checking whether there is reinsurance demand, and then making full policies out of these offers. Okay, so that's it for the technical part. Of course, technique is nice, and if we have tools that support all this, it's a good start. But we also need organizational aspects and organizational topics to enforce all these architectural and modeling guidelines. And what we did was that we based this on two kind of pillars. On the one hand side, we had two kinds of boards during the development process. Some kind of modeling board, which consists of architects, lead developers, business experts, who are actually responsible for building up the models, and they actively work. They do not only review or confirm models, but they build these models. And what we also need is kind of alignment board, mainly made up by line management, which is responsible for bringing this information into the whole development team, talking to customers, getting feedback from customers, and so on and so forth. On the other hand side, of course, everything that is kind of assumed or given as a guideline for the development has been written into appropriate guidelines, which can be, of course, or should be used by the developers. They read them and they hopefully apply them. And these guidelines are also used within these boards to check whether the current development coheres to our guidelines or not. So to handle these quality criteria for the usage of business attributes only, which is a very important quality criterion. We do not want technical attributes, we only want business attributes in our service definition. We have appropriate requirements in the guidelines. Sorry. And of course, the models have to be approved by the boards. So this is the kind of quality assurance process for this requirement. For the appropriate granularity of services, we did not find a very, very clever way or anything that is applicable for all development, but we actually rely on the knowledge of experts and of technical experts who know how to build services and in which granularity to build them. And the same goes for the reusability and for the loose coupling that we want to achieve within our services. It's mainly a combination of guidelines and the knowledge of experts who work on these topics. Okay, for a brief summary, first of all, I've brought you some kind of before and after picture. This is FSRI as we knew it before our efforts. Traditional sub GUI, everyone's a bit scared. Oh, so many input fields, so many buttons. And what we had afterwards is equally many input fields and buttons, but a different kind of working on it. So that we have actually the process within the system. This is one screenshot out of the reference processes. Actually, I think it's this part of this process printed down here, and this is exactly what the customer expects and how his business works. So for the last slide, and for a brief summary of the lessons learned, the biggest challenge that we were facing was indeed that we had to kind of bridge the business model, which is kind of the view customers have on the business, on our software, and the legacy technical implementation, because no one can afford to rebuild any implementation that already exists, but you have to build the rest upon of it. And as you will all agree, since we're talking about S-BPM, is that the model first paradigm is very important, that we do not start developing and then document, but we start with a model, which leads to the fact that we get in practice very early feedback from stakeholders, especially also from customers, from reference customers. And it is also very important, as we found out, to have boards that participate in this development process, because it's quite funny, but it's actually the fact that the word board itself leads to management attention. If you call it work group or task force, it's just someone they're working on something. As soon as you call it board, it has more impact on management. So what we actually achieved, it's hard to measure, but you can believe me or not, is that we really managed to get quite high quality services in our application or on top of our application. And thus we got very positive feedback from development teams, because they always had some kind of models and some kind of guidelines they could adhere to, and they knew they were building the application the right way. We also had positive response and feedback from management, and last and most important, customers gave very positive feedback on this approach too. Okay, that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you. Thank you for your attention. I think we're on time, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. No? It's working now?
Ah, yeah, no.
Guppenberger, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Interesting speech. And the red light was on. Okay. So, are there any questions from the audience? Yes. Can I give you the microphone?
I got a question concerning the process models, especially you talked about how should I say, that there's a problem kind of to align business and IT views. Did you use two models, or two process models, or did you use one? Because I don't know, for a business guy, the model might be too complicated or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, from a historical point of view, we use several models. We started with an initiative to build EPKs, which is kind of what business guys usually use to build up their models, and this was kind of the basis for our reference processes. It was the large-scale picture about how reinsurance works, if you want to call it like that. And the initiative regarding this project was then to refine that and to build quite fine-grained business processes to find out which services to call, how to compose them, in which order, and so on and so forth. But what I meant with the difficulty between the business model and the technical model is that the implementation of services, it already existed, and it was a legacy system, and it was more than 10 years old. So we would have been very happy if we had any models of how that worked, but actually there were not so many. So if we would have had the model for the implementation, how the application works, it would have probably been a bit easier. But we did not have that, at least not in detail.
Okay. So you don't kind of split between business and IT models?
No, not really. Our approach is that these models are, they can be used for both sides. They can be used for the IT and for the business. But of course, that's quite difficult sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. And one more question.
Sure.
Also concerning the processes, do you also orchestrate processes somehow, or do you have single processes all the time?
As I said, I'm not an expert in this topic because I do not deal with processes that much. But I know that the process that you saw on the 6th or 7th slide is just part of the overall process landscape. So of course there is orchestration between them. You even have to start processes in remote systems where different processes run. You have to bring back the correlation, any process identifiers, instance identifiers, and so on. But I'm not so much into this topic, sorry.
Okay, one last question. the release of this solution? Can you maybe say some words about that?
What do you mean with release?
Is it I don't know, a CE 7.2 or 3, or is it already a PO or something like that?
Okay, the platform we're building this on is the NetWeaver 7.3.
Okay.
And I think the application itself is version 7.0 for the current FSRI solution. So it's quite up to date.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the interesting talk. I would be interested in how much the different customer solutions differ in the end. So from one customer to the other when you apply it, and what are the effort drivers for customization for the different customers then?
Well, you're quite asking this question to the wrong person, because I'm in software development, and we have I think 2,000 consultants out there who do exactly this. They go to customers, they find out how their business works. As far as I know, and as far as this information comes into our team, it's actually very different. So especially the large reinsurance, like a Gen Re in the US or Munich Re in Munich, who are the largest in the business, they have their own homegrown processes for 20 years or more. And in basic, these processes do the same, but they do it in a different way. So we have to find some kind of in Germany would be the kleinste gemeinsame Nenner, so what they actually all have in common, and we assume that, and we rely on it. Yeah.
Okay, and if you adapt it, and that's just from a feeling point from you as well, is the effort then designing the different process models, or is it more in adapting the UI to the specific needs, creating other services?
From my experience, the development of the UIs is not the biggest part, because we have, especially in the SAP environment, we have very good tool support for that. So you can quite quickly just pick any services, say I need them in my process at this place with these attributes, and 5 of them ready to be input, and 5 of them are just display. So this is something that you can do quite quickly as soon as you know how the process works. So the main effort is actually to find out how the processes work, where to get the different functionalities. You have really loads of legacy systems in these large companies. You have to bring them to get them into your solution. You have to build technical interfaces to any legacy systems and so on. So this is actually the main effort driver.
Yeah. Customized especially for this process. So for each process step, you customize the UI the user actually expects for that process step.
Yeah. In practice, you even go one step further, because often it's so that the users at the customer, different users, can even adapt the UIs to their needs. So whether they are power users or just casual users, or if they prefer to see it in black instead of red, to give a simple example. That's what's actually happening out there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there any other questions? I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
And, you told about something about service granularity, which is always a big problem. And your approach, as I understand, was to just choose the medium granularity level.
Yep.
But this is just a statistic approach, which still might lead to some effort, because probably some customers want to have a higher or lower granularity. Have you ever thought of like offering a flexible granularity, like composing functionality in relation also to business objects, like having composed business objects processed by composed functionality? Probably would this be a, I don't know, possibility with this architecture?
To give the brief answer, no. We did not really think that through. As far as I understand it, it would probably be possible with the architectures. As we built these services to be independent of each other, it would be quite easily possible to kind of aggregate them to different services. And what we actually do, I do not have a silver bullet. I cannot tell you do it like that and then you have the right granularity. But a good starting point is to take your business objects, to define some kind of CRUD operations on these business objects, to define any business functions like a cancellation of a policy on these business objects. And then you can either aggregate them, which is what we usually do not do because this is what happens within the processes, but you can even refine them further if you need that. If you have any reference process, for instance, where you know that you would need some kind of particular functionality down there in the business objects, okay, then you add it. That's the reason why we use these reference processes, to find out which granularity we actually need. But of course, this is no 100% solution. We cannot say that, okay, we have all the services that any customer might need in the next 20 years or so.
Okay, Mr. Guppenberger, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.